All right, so this also has to do with linguistics, but I wanted to talk a little bit about here on Earth, right? We have, as far as we know, because it's possible we've had first contact, but we're not, I guess, aware. We have some rumors of UFOs from government agencies and things, but we're not.
Lots and lots of cell phone video.
Yeah,
well,
right.
I'm the one scientist that says recently they found space trash that he thought was extraterrestrial.
Is
Oh,
it?
I hadn't
This
heard about
object that
okay.
went past the Earth, and it, ironically enough, it looked
Oh yeah,
kind of like the shape of those ships.
Oh yeah, Oumuamua.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ironically, Oumuamua means the messenger.
Oh, wow.
And he was speculating that it was extraterrestrial in origin.
So obviously we're in a time in our history where first contact may be imminent, and we're thinking a lot about first contact, and that's where movies like this come from. This made me think a lot about xenolinguistics, right? If we haven't met aliens yet, but we want to start figuring out how would we communicate with them, I feel like we can go ahead and do that. And one of the things for me that was very apparent, twice Hannah talks about the show Mommy and Daddy Talk to Animals. And if you look at studies that are done of Coco, of various dogs, there's some great studies, look them
Corvids.
up on, there are also some great studies that have been done on prairie dogs and how they communicate. These styles of communication, the first thing you have to embrace is how the animal lives, what the animal's perspective is like. Are they mostly focused on the color of someone that comes near them to determine if it's enemy? Are they focused on food sources? Are they focused on emotional needs, but maybe they're different from human emotional needs? And I noticed early in the film, Louise is doing the tickle guns, and her hands, she waves them kind of like heptapod hands, and then we see Hannah in the background, and she's tied like a coat or a sweater around her, and so it looks like she's got multiple tentacles like the heptapods, right? This is foreshadowing of they're going to fall under the influence, or they're going to be influenced by the heptapods. This is, we're going to come back around to this. She's doing the clay figure of the heptapods when she talks about the show Mommy and Daddy Talk to Animals, and it really made me think, if we want to prepare to talk to aliens, we need to understand animal language, not in an anthropocentric way, not looking at it from a human point of view, but figuring out what it's like for the animals. I think that would be how we begin. In a sense, and I wonder, when we see the tickle guns and when we see Hannah with the sweater sleeves and things, is this foreshadowing like we're all part of the same family, right? Just like you and the bird that you bring. And how do they use that bird? They're just using it to figure out if the air's bad, right? That immediately sets a precedent for how humans treat non-human animals, right? Even though they're animals as well. And it makes me wonder, are heptapods and humans ultimately part of the same family tree that's spread between planets or something like that? And we're really talking, in a sense, to animals the way we might talk to our chimpanzee, living vestiges of our ancestors that were chimps or something like that. Right, exactly.
Or use technology.
Or have a common ancestor.
One of the words that came up was technology. Did we find technology to enhance us and turn us into these beings
right.
that could transcend time?
Because there was a constellation of words that was translated as like weapon, and they were what? Technology process,
method, tool.
Yeah, things like that. So it was like
it was technology, apparatus, method.
Apparatus, yeah. And it made me, because I don't think tool was on there, but I think apparatus was, and that's close, I would say synonymous in many contexts. And so it made me wonder, like, the way that animals are, maybe not direct descendants, but share lineages with us. Do we share lineages with the heptapods? Are we going to help them out later on because of our shared lineage, And that made me think, immediately we need to establish xenolinguistics programs and start studying animal language in a non-anthropocentric way.
Do they need maybe something has happened to their genome, and they need to, if we are related to them, do they need to go back to like the source material with our DNA?
Maybe they can go back in time, but they need contact to share our time stream,
right.
So that would make sense, yeah.
I mean, that, I'm fascinated by DNA and bacteria and viruses and how we interact with them. And so it's like, when a DNA becomes corrupted, is there a way to go back and try to get an original?
Especially if you don't have to worry about linear time anymore.
Right.
Yeah. You were just making me think, when we look at the difference between like, you know, even like a bacterium and a human being, the actual genetic material is not that different. I can't remember what percentage is different, but it's a small percentage, and it makes us aware that that life is very, very multifaceted, that there's a lot of types of life that could arise outside of us, even using our same genetic material there could be, and so that's very interesting as well.
We have a biome in our bodies. They talk about the gut biome, that we wouldn't be alive if we didn't have the bacteria in our digestive system, or if we didn't have the immune system that we have. And
that affects our thinking too, the neurology of our gut.
Yeah, and our physical health impacts our mental health, and vice versa. So that whole aspect of, these are very, very tiny animals, bacteria.
But you want to feed them.
If you want to call them animals, that we're still connected to. And things like learning about languages, we heard it through the film so much, where they sound like whales and dolphins. And then my first thought, like, oh, they must be aquatic animals, or their planet must be aquatic, because that's what they sound like. And there is some studies in progress communicating with whales and dolphins.
Right. Yes. And their languages are very fascinating. Yes.
Yeah, and they can hear differences in their
calls. But imagine how different their environment is, right?
Yeah.
With dolphin calls, they've actually found that dolphins from different areas have different dialects.
To me, that is so
one of the things that I think we could learn, and this reminds me, there's a great Stephen Baxter series called The Origin Novels, and in the first book he talks about how it makes so much sense to send squids into space and to let squids be navigators, because they're used to an environment where they can move in all directions, rather than a human environment that's limited to a flat ground that we're moving over. And we have so many metaphors. If you read the book Metaphors We Live By Lakoff and Johnson, I think, it talks about how so much of our metaphors, when we use up and down, are oriented toward our space-time, where we are in space, right? Up is more like, it's more positive, because when we're looking up, we tend to feel better. We tend to look down biologically when we feel worse, or we tend to be closer to the ground, things like that. Well, if the heptapods are not anchored in physical space that way, if they're aquatic beings, or if they're in an atmosphere that they can move through in all directions, then that would change even the most basic spatial metaphors of language, and that could change how reality is perceived in a big way. And so if we want to learn more about that, about aliens that maybe exist in space, or exist in zero gravity, or planets that are aquatic or whatever, look to the aquatic animals on our planet.
That reminds me of like the different ways directions are cited throughout cultures. Like Luis brings up how when Captain Cook, or whoever it was, Captain Cook met the Australian Aborigines, and brings up the whole, what is this place? Kangaroo, or what is that thing? Kangaroo. But with the Australian Aborigines, how when white Europeans are indicating the directions, it's pointing away from themselves, but when an Aboriginal person will indicate north, they'll point through themselves.
Interesting thought about the linguistics. When she says to them, can you communicate with your other ships? Pass this message to them. How are they going to do that? Because there's no evidence that they had radios. And I was thinking of sonar with whales, bats.
They I do think specifically they say there's no sonar or sonic pulses or anything going between the ships, but that's ones that they can perceive.
Is it like some sort of, I think it's some kind of a telepathic link.
I felt like,
more than reaching back and forth through time.
It might have been like either a temporal or a hive mind.
I felt they could be reaching through the temporally reaching through, but I also wondered, are they simultaneously existing separate and together? Like they're one of 12 parts. Is there some sense in which they are right there with each other, or right next to each other in a way that we can't perceive?
So like hive mind with a central brain. Maybe.
Could be. The Borg.
I hope not.
Or
definitely not as violent.
What I was thinking was like oh come on, what anime is that? So, like, it's this anime where these people are piloting mechs, and they can link minds with each other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What you were saying about the story of the Aborigines,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was very interesting because that is an apocryphal story, as one of you guys was mentioning as we watched the film. That is an apocryphal story, but the fact that it's apocryphal, I thought they worked that into the film well because it's very realistic, and it shows how we don't necessarily tell stories about reality, like, or even our reality is just made up of storytelling. We tell stories in a certain way. We tell the story, the mahjong story of this is framed in conflict, or the non-zero sum game story of we can help each other out. And the fact that I liked that detail that was an apocryphal story that still made a big difference when she explained it to Forrest Whitaker's character.
Mm-hmm.
And that brought up a whole bunch of like linguistic Tumblr post stuff for me. Yes, because like people on my dash at least get into all these linguistic debates with each other. Like one OP was saying, you know, how did people first start figuring out what stuff was called in each other's languages, and the next person was like, English. This is an apple. French. Say a fucking poem. And then like next person mentioned something about like when the Spanish came to Mexico, and they asked, what land is this? The person responded, Yucatan, which actually meant what are you saying?
Yeah.
Right, it was just like the Aboriginal story, but it actually happened. Yeah. So that shows how realistic that was. Yeah.
So the thing with the xenolinguistics and with understanding animal languages, I think part of the thing with it, there's a list of animals I would love to be able to talk to.
Yes.
Whales are one.
Yes.
Because they are incredibly intelligent, and we've seen so many instances through history of them cooperating with humans.
Yes.
Saving sailors that have fallen overboard.
The orcas.
The orcas driving fish inland for this village as long as they did not hurt the orcas. And so I think in Finding Nemo, I was like, I want to be Dory. I can speak whale, and she's going on the noise. But that's not orca-ish to you. Apes, because Coco the gorilla was this amazing being. I don't even want to say creature. I think she was a beautiful soul. Because some of the things that she signed, the incredible understanding
things about the environment, things about the connectedness of biological organisms.
And I'm like, that was, people use the term dumb animal. And I think some of the argument against trying to understand animals better is because, like the bird, we're going to put you in this potentially dangerous environment, and we don't care if you die. Yeah. And the way people it would have to change our behavior with animals.
That's why I'm saying that we need an like a non-anthropocentric way, a way where we step outside of what it means to be human, and we try to understand animals on their own terms. Because yes, if we're just looking at them the way we are and exploiting them, that's not going to work. But what you guys were just talking about, think about how we define intelligence. May not be the way that others express intelligence, right? They're the heptapods. They're ships, but other than that, we didn't see anything that seemed artificial, like tools or clothes or things, right? So maybe that was not part of their culture. We tend to see things more intelligent if they're more hierarchical, but that may not be so in our universe. Tool making and tool usage we see is more, but like if you were a telepathic species or a telekinetic species, you might not need to develop tools. You might just use your mind for everything. So we don't know, if the ways that we see intelligent, there might be animals on the planet that are more intelligent than we are, but we're not ready to evaluate that yet, and we need to reach that point, especially if we want to be ready for first contact.
Right. Well, how do animals know when an earthquake is going to happen?
Right.
Well documented. Pandas will scream, animals will run off, birds will fly off, and they've learned to pay attention to that because they're telling us something. Yeah. And I think we have, getting back to the earlier idea of how it would change how we interact with animals. I don't know did you ever see the film The Cove? It was about the dolphins in parks. It's very hard to watch because some parts it's just bloody and gruesome how these dolphins are hunted. and actually it was the trainer who trained Flipper for the TV show.
Okay.
Saw one of his dolphins he trained commit suicide, and he realized, oh my God, these animals are intelligent enough to choose. She went underwater and chose not to come back up and breathe. She drowned herself because she was so miserable. And I think people aren't ready to face that idea.
Yes.
I mean, we don't eat dogs and cats. We have an aversion to eating dogs and cats. We wouldn't want to eat our pets.
At least in the West.
Right.
Yeah, in the West, we see them as family. So I think being able to communicate with animals, it's a thing that humans don't want to do yet. They don't want to see them as...
And with the
anything
cove
other
example,
food or
like,
whatever.
and orca examples, you bring up that, like, we need to stop forcing animals into human environments and try to make them think and experience reality the way humans do if we're going to understand them and their language. And if we're going to set an example, like if aliens come to Earth, do we want them to see us mistreating animals or treating them well and communicating?
From what he said about dolphins, from the tests they've been able to do, they are at least as intelligent as a 7-year-old human child.
Well,
But
and
that's our intelligence. How much better is their intelligence because of their environment? They can
and I think
navigate
it's
hundreds
very
of thousands
artificial
of miles
to put
you know.
intelligence on a very linear scale of IQ or age level. I mean, we're very limiting. And we know, like if you look at Gardner's multiple intelligences and other models of intelligence, we know that our aspects of intelligence, even in our schools, is very, very limited. But you brought up with the Cove example, it made me think of that movie Blackfish, right? Where they're suicidal because they're being kept in captivity and they're entertaining humans, and it made me think like, how much more intelligence could we see and how much more could they teach us if we let them be in their natural environments and if we supported the environments that they live in instead of forcing them into artificial ones?
Yeah. We want to make dolphins like take IQ tests and stuff. It's like, what would humans do if you suddenly threw us out in the middle of the ocean? Hey, live like a whale. You would die within hours.
And the words,
minutes,
quote unquote, that we want to teach them, right? You know, those words are... They're what we would teach, like there's that scene in Arrival where maybe it's Forrest Whitaker's character. Sorry, I can't remember the name of his character.
He's looking at the vocabulary list.
Yes, and he's like, "This is a grade school," you know, and she's like, "How can you be this dumb?" You know, but it's like these are grade school words, and it's like in your linear, limited perspective. But these are the basic words that we need to learn to figure out if we're on the same ground. And they can't even figure out. Oh, before we can ask what your purpose is, they have to understand the nature of a query and you know, singular versus plural you and all that stuff she's talking about, you know. So we have to find that common ground.
I thought that was brilliant. In any communication, you have to establish the basics.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved how she just broke down this sentence into its component parts and was like, now, what did we learn?
And even though we intuitively knew that that's what went into such a query, it took quite a lot of intelligence as a linguist, but also as a communicator. The kind of intelligence that made her say, this is a desire for more cows, to say, this is how we break it up. Because it's intuitive to us what these parts are, but it's not intuitive maybe to them.